Alright, here's my chat server. Build a chat server class in superclass threading. Initialize it. Start the thread. Declare instance variables, host, port, connections, and running. Here's a method inside of the class just to do the simple, the server socket binding. Once it binds, it's going to print a little message saying which port it's listening on. Send is going to take a socket and a message and just send it. Very simple. Well, actually, it's not a message. It's the data. So it's going to take a message and then encode it and then send it over the socket. Receive takes a socket, receives it into a buffer, and then returns that data. Broadcast is what's going to send it out to all the other connected clients. It takes a client socket, so the sender and the message. It's going to loop through the list of connections. As long as the socket is not the server socket and not the sending client socket, so not itself, it's going to send those. It's going to send that message, which is actually still in the form of bytes. It's actually data, not a message. It's going to send those bytes to each client, except if there's error, obviously. Run. This is the run function. Not the actual run, but like a pseudo run. So it's while it's running. Use a select, which can actually look for not only like bindings for the sockets, but also can wait for incoming messages. So it's a pretty cool method. So I set the reader select, writer select, error select. I set the reader to self.connections. So if there's some type of activity in select, so either a bind or a incoming message from a client, if it is activity from the server socket, meaning the client's trying to bind to the server socket, it's going to try to accept the connection. And then it will append that connection to the connections inform, and it will inform all the connected clients that it is there's a new client in the chat room. And then if it's not a server socket, meaning it's an incoming message from a client socket, it's going to try to receive. If there's data, it's going to decode the data and then take that data and broadcast it to all connected clients. Except if there's an error, which means that the client has gone offline, it'll let everyone know, and then it'll close that socket and remove that connection from the list. And then at the end of the function, it'll stop, called the stop method, which will turn running to false and close the server socket. This is the actual run method, but it's doing two things. It's going to call the bind socket method and then all the pseudo run as well. Main method just gets the instance up and going and starts it. Port and range, just making sure the port's proper. And then here's just the main. Okay. And here's the chat client. Basically the same thing, honestly. And initiate host port active, and the name. The name is actually going to be the name of the user. Connect to server, just a basic connect to server stuff for the client socket. It's going to try to connect. and then it will let you know if it connects or not. Receive and output is going to take data, and it's going to print it out on the standard out.write and then flush it. Receive is going to take the socket, and then receive data from that socket. Read it into. And then return that data. Send data. It's going to build a small name string, so it's going to take the self.name and append it into the string, the format. And then it's going to create a message string by taking that name string and adding it to the message that's been passed as an argument. It's going to encode that message, and then it's going to send it over the socket to the server. Name checker it's just checking that the first input by a client is a name, so it's only one string long. So I split it, and as long as that split string length is 1, then it'll accept it. So the name has to just be one name. It can't be a string of multiple words. And then it'll reprompt if you're not typing in the correct stuff. This is the pseudo run method. So this one is going to take an input-output variable, and it's going to sit on. So it's going to not necessarily block, but it's going to sit and wait for an event or activity, either from standard in or from the client socket, meaning that it received something. So while it's active, it's going to use the select to wait for activity on either the standard in or the client socket. So for sock and the reader select, if the sock is equal to the self.client sock, that means it's receiving a message. It's going to call that receive method up above and pull that data into data. And it's going to take that and output it to standard out. And then if there's an error, it's going to print out an error message. Else, if this is if they haven't done the name yet, and it is sys.standardin input, it's going to take whatever they put into the at the first time, whatever they put into the message, and it's going to take that and run it to the name checker to make sure that the first entry was a name and not a string of different words. And then once it takes that, it's just going to continue, because it's not going to send out the name initially. It's going to send out the next message after the name's been entered. And then if self.name has already been declared as a variable and it's already been initialized, it will just take that input message, so whatever the second message that they put in is, and then read that, and then to leave the method or to leave the chat room, if the input message is :by, it'll call the self.stop method and then continue just to get back up to the top of the loop, and then it'll exit. Rather than if it didn't continue, it would call this method and it would blow up. And then if it's not by and it's a normal string of characters or string of words, it'll call the send data method and broadcast the message to, or send the message to the server to do the broadcasting. Here's the real run method calling the connect to server and the pseudo run. There's the stop method setting active to false and then closing the client socket. And here's the main method, port and range.